Hello and welcome to Tim Conley Drums. I have to be honest, I've kind of dreaded this video. I've hummed and hawed about whether or not I was going to talk about this over and over, but I've decided that the time has come. I need to talk about this. So what I'm talking about is alcohol and drugs, and how it has immensely negatively affected my family and my life. Now, like I said, I really hummed and hawed about this. I've been thinking about this video for months, and today I decided I am going to talk about it. And what inspired me was several things. One was talking about my situation with my family, of what I went through as a child, my upbringing in an alcoholic family, and specifically my son, talking to my son about what I went through as a child and telling him how lucky he is that he doesn't have to go through any of this. That was probably the main motivation to get this video finally up and out. And I was inspired by my family saying, you need to talk about this. That's one thing. The other thing was also drummer friends of mine, encouraging me to get this off my chest and talk about it. And also my sister, who inadvertently, without her even realizing, sort of made me want to talk about this. Actually, two of my sisters made me want to talk about this. My sister Shirley, first and foremost, because she wrote a book about her childhood and her upbringing. She's quite a bit older than me, and she had it a lot worse than me, to be totally honest. She had it a lot worse than me. I actually had it pretty good compared to what my four sisters and brother went through at the hands of an alcoholic parent and all his alcoholic siblings. So the other thing that inspired me, believe it or not, was the death of Duke Gadd, Steve Gadd's son. I just did a video just an hour or two ago about Steve Gadd's son dying from fentanyl. And that made me start thinking about my own situation and how it's had such a negative impact in my life. And I thought, I think now is the time that I'm going to share. So first, I want to talk about my sister Shirley's situation, because I mentioned it briefly in the Steve Gadd son video. My sister Shirley had four sons, and I say had because three of them died. One died in a car accident. His name was Tommy, and I was quite close to him when he was young, and probably Tom and Rob is still alive. I was close to them when they were kids because they were only a few years younger than me. I was a very young uncle. I think I was 5 or 6 when Tom was born. So being a very young uncle and my sister being a young mom, they were around the house quite a bit. So Tom and Rob, when they were little, I used to spend a fair bit of time with them. Not as much as my nephews, Mike, Brian, and Greg. I spent a ton of time around them, and I was very, very close to them growing up. And my sister Mary, I was very, very close. I was the closest to my sister Mary to this day. I'm still the closest to Mary out of all my siblings. Now, Shirley's two other sons, she had Rob and Tom from my brother-in-law Arnie, and then they divorced, and she got remarried to a guy named Stephen, and she had 2 kids with Stephen, Reagan and Kevin. And the 2 of them died, sadly, from drug overdose. So this has been a problem in my family. And if you've watched any of my videos, I'm also doing this for my subscribers because I feel like I have a pretty warm and loving subscriber base, and a lot of guys seem really interested in my life and things that I've done. So that's another reason why I decided to do this today. So it all goes back to when I was young. My father was a severe alcoholic. His name was Daniel. That's my middle name, Daniel Connolly. He died very young. He died in 1982. I think he was about 51 years old. He was quite young. And he died of cirrhosis of the liver because he was a chronic, severe alcoholic. I don't know why. I don't know why he was a severe chronic alcoholic. I just know that he was. I can remember asking my mother, who was a very loving, wonderful, awesome lady. She was not an alcoholic. She barely drank at all. She was the pillar in my life. She was the angel that I looked up to. Her and her mother, my grandmother, Emma Wilson, who I named my daughters after. And my dad was, it's hard for me to talk about this. He was a mean-spirited soul. He used to beat up my sisters, beat up my brother. He never beat me up. I got threatened a lot, but I never actually got beat up because my mother always protected me. She finally laid the law down and kicked him out of the house when I was about 4, I think. And I remember the day he left. I was outside playing table hockey with my friend Ian Ferguson. I can't believe I remember that kid's name because we're talking, I'm almost 60 years old. We're talking 56 years ago, but I remember the kid's name. And Ian and I are out there playing table hockey. My dad comes out of the into the backyard because we were in the backyard. He opens the screen porch door, comes out, he's carrying a box, and he says, "Tim, I'm going away." And I said, "Where are you going?" He says, "I'm going away. I'm going to be gone for a while. You're the new man of the house. Look after your mother." And that was it. He packed his stuff up and he left. Now, I did see him again, obviously, but I just remember that day as a day of something that really stands out in my memory of him actually leaving. Now, I can remember saying to my mother as time passed, "What's he like sober?" Because I know this is going to be hard for you guys to believe, but I never once saw my father sober. He was perpetually and always drunk. If he would go to sleep drunk, he would wake up, the first thing he would turn to was drinks, and his choice of drink was usually wine, but he would drink whatever he could get his hands on, beer, wine, whatever, but wine. He was a wino. That's what we called him, a wino. Now, I'm not really going to get into a lot of details. I'm sort of giving you guys a Cole's Notes version of what happened to me in my life and whatnot, and what motivated me to become a drummer. But one thing that was very strange was my dad, my grandmother, my grandfather, which were his parents. They all lived in the same area, by the way. My grandmother and grandparents lived on one side of the street. My dad, my uncles, they all lived on the other side of the street. So they all lived in the same area. They all died at the same time. It was very strange. My dad, my grandmother, my grandfather, my Uncle Bill, my Uncle Johnny, they all died within a 2-year period. Now, other than my grandmother, they were all alcoholics. So the alcohol killed them all young. That's basically what happened. I went to funeral after a funeral after a funeral back then when I was 17, 18, because all my dad's family just passing away from alcohol abuse. And it was then that I decided, this is not the life for me. Look what it's done. It's obliterated my frickin' family. Look what it's done to my family. This isn't going to happen to me. My dad, my grandfather, my Uncle Bill, my Uncle Johnny, my Aunt Irene, on my mother's side, my Uncle Louie, they were all alcoholics. All of them. My own brother, Pat, also became an alcoholic. Pat is still alive, but sadly, he's at the end of his days. He's in an old folks home, and He's not doing well. But if we go back to my childhood, I wasn't very close to my father. He never bought me a birthday present. He never bought me a Christmas present. I would see him, but not very often because he was always drunk, and my mother just didn't want me around him. And like I said, my mother and my mother's mother, Grandma Wilson, they were my saviors. The only reason that I turned out to be a decent person probably is because of them. And my mom was really, she was on top of me, that nagging mom that's on you. Well, I understand why she was like that. I didn't understand at the time. I just thought she's a pain in the ass as a teenager and as a young adult. It wasn't until she passed away and I started to think about my childhood and my early days as a young adult, trying to become a drummer and everything, why she was on me so much, why the way she was. She was the way she was with me, so controlling and on me, because she didn't want me to turn out like him. I get it. I get it. So if there's going to be a message that I come across with today is drugs and alcohol, I don't care what anybody says, it's bad. Now, I stayed clear of it. I used to drink. I don't drink anymore. I used to drink, but never heavily. And I very rarely got drunk. I bet you the last time I got drunk was 25, 30 years ago. It's just not something that I've ever really done in my life. I have been drunk, but not very often. I've never used any drugs at all. I mean, I tried marijuana when I was, 17, 18 or something, but I didn't like it. It's just like a cigarette. It just made me choke and I didn't like it. One time I got drugged up. There's a story on one of my other videos. I got drugged up at a gig, but I did not take that willingly. It was something thrown in my drink that I didn't even know. I was drinking a beer, actually. I drank a beer and it was spiked. That's another video that's on my channel telling the story of when I got drugged up. And someone like me that doesn't drink hardly at all and certainly doesn't use any form of drugs at all, that was a rough night, but that's a whole other story. Anyways, getting back to my dad, he passed away very young. He died in 1982 at the age of 51. And like I said, he was a troubled soul. I don't know why he was such a bad drunk. I don't know why. It's just, the Irish people, Connolly is an Irish name, they like to drink. They like to party. They like to have fun, and they like to drown their sorrows as well. That's the only thing I can think of. Now, he had a wife and 6 children. So maybe it was too much for him. I don't know, but he drank all through his life. Like I said, I asked my mom, what was he like when he was sober? She said he was a pleasant guy and that he was actually a nice person. I never saw it. It's really hard for me to talk about this. I never saw it. All I ever saw was anger, violence. I've got story after story of the violence that I saw, him attacking my mother, choking her with a telephone cord, my brother defending my mother and protecting her against my dad when he was a teenager. And I was just a little kid. I was just a helpless little kid watching this unfold in front of me. The police were always at my house. I mean, it was a nightmare in a lot of ways. Now, my mom kicked him out of the house. And then she got involved with another man who was my stepfather, who also was an alcoholic. So I don't know, I love my mother intensely, but why on God's earth would you get involved with another man that was an alcoholic? Now, he was abusive to me too. Now, he was abusive to me in a head game kind of way. He would always play head games with me. Now, my dad, yeah, he would play head games with me too, but he was so drunk all the time that it was quite easy to outmaneuver him, even as a child. He would say something stupid to me. I remember the one time he said to me, "Don't start drinking. That's the only good piece of advice he ever gave me. Don't start drinking. That's it. He never gave me anything else other than that. So my stepfather, I have had a terrible time with him as a child and as a teenager, even as a young man. We used to battle it out a lot. And my mom was in the middle of it again. She was the protector. She was always protecting me. Now, strangely, as I got older and after I got married the second time, it was like something changed. And I actually became close to Keith. And him and our relationship really changed. And I never let the past get in the way, because after my son was born 19 years ago, Keith changed. First of all, he quit drinking in 1985. I forgot to mention that. After my mother's heart attacks, he quit drinking. And he was better when he quit drinking. He also developed diabetes, and that was another reason why he had to quit drinking, was my mother's heart attack and for the sake of his own health. So after he quit drinking and he wasn't drunk every day, as an adult, I slowly started to develop a relationship with him, and then we became close. And he died sadly in 2009, tragically in a car accident. Now, unbelievably, I was driving, it happened in Milton, Ontario, and I was driving along Tremaine Road, and I go to make a right turn onto a side road. I can't remember the name of the road, but I went to make a right turn on the side road, and the police were there. The police stopped me and said, "There's been a car accident. You can't turn down this road. You're going to have to continue straight on Tremaine Road." And I said, "Oh, has anybody been hurt?" And he said, "Sadly, an elderly man was killed." And I'm like, "Oh, that's terrible." And I looked at the vehicle because it was, 100 yards down the road. It was totally trashed, and I kept going. Little did I know that was my stepfather that he was talking about. That was his car. I didn't recognize it because the car was so trashed. I didn't recognize the car. I didn't find out until that evening. This was in the morning. I found out that evening that he had been killed tragically in that accident. The last person to see him was my wife, Kim, and my baby son at the time, Liam, because it was his birthday. It was Keith's birthday, and he had been to our house, and he was driving home from my house when he had he was, like I said, he had diabetic problems. He had a diabetic episode, got into a car accident, and he was killed. It was very tragic in our family. Nothing to do with alcohol or drugs, because like I said, he had quit. At that time, he didn't drink at all. But just what I went through as a child, in some ways, I had an amazing childhood. I played hockey. I was very athletic. I was a drummer. My mom was very loving and warm and protective. But I had these other men in my life, one of which being my own father, who for some reason he never showed me any love. He never once, took me under his arm and said, "Son, this is what you need to do." Sorry, guys. I said this was going to be difficult, and it is. Let me just give me a second here. I don't like to do cuts. This is raw. Up until about 5 years ago, I'll be honest with you, none of this really bothered me. I grew up with it. He died when I was very young. I was 17, 18 years old. I wasn't even upset. I didn't cry when he died. And I just carried on with my life. I was more upset when my stepfather died than when my father died, because I was actually closer to my stepfather than I was to my own father. He died young. I was young. And like I said, he was drunk every day. He did nothing for me. Nothing. I got a stamp collection, and I sold it for $35. That's what I got from his estate. Anyways, About 5 years ago, my son, who's now 19, started asking me questions about my life, about my mother, about my father, about my siblings. He started asking me questions, and I started telling him stories about things that happened to me, stories about fights that my parents were in, me witnessing violence, not getting anything for Christmas from my dad never caring what I was up to. I can remember when I was my mom said, he wants to be a drummer. And my dad thinking, that's a stupid thing. Why the hell does he want to be a drummer? And I can remember saying to my mother, well, what's he done with his life? He was a farmer. That's actually what he was. He was a farmer, and they had a family farm, the Connolly farm in Oakville, and they would sell the vegetables that they would grow like in a street, those, you're driving along the street and you see somebody with a little table full of vegetables and stuff. That's how he survived, but they didn't make hardly any money. My mom had to, she was a nurse. I think she went to nursing school around 1960, and she saved the family from absolute and total poverty. So I didn't grow up in total poverty. We weren't rich, but we weren't extremely poor. I actually grew up in a nice neighborhood. The house was a shack, though. Here's a picture of the house I grew up in. It was a shack. But at the same time, I didn't know any different. I loved the place, and everybody thought it was haunted. We did it up on Halloween, and it was the best house in the entire neighborhood because everybody thought the place was haunted. So we had tons of people on Halloween, and I loved it as a kid, and I used to play it up. Oh yeah, the ghosts, the place is haunted, I never really actually saw any ghosts. I heard lots and lots of weird noises. The house was 170 years old when it was torn down in 1985. I think the house was torn down and then a new house was built. But anyways, my son started talking to me and asking me questions, and that's when something went off in my head, and I started thinking about my childhood. I started thinking about my dad. I started thinking about why was he the way he was, and I started talking to my sisters about it. And they're the only people that I really talk to. Of course, I talked to my son, talked to my wife. I never really talked to anybody else. So if you're watching this and you know me, like I have some friends that I've known since kindergarten. You guys are going to remember. You might not remember my dad necessarily because he wasn't really around. I would go to his house and see him. But you remember Keith. And you remember my brothers and sisters, I'm sure. And I know that you guys don't know this, but things were tough. I never said it. I was a happy kid. I never let off that things were tough at home. I didn't talk about my dad showing up at midnight and rooting through my mom's cookie jars, trying to find a few bucks so he could go get a bottle of wine, and fighting with my mother because she would say, I need that money for food to feed these kids. I need that money for rent to pay for the housing. He didn't care. He wanted that money because he was an alcoholic. And this is the whole point of this video. Alcohol and drugs kill families. They destroy people. And I'm totally against it. And now you guys know why I'm the way I am whenever I get on here and I say I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs. It's because you got two choices when you're in a situation like I was in as a teenager. You can go with your dad, and the way my brother went, which was to become a druggie and an alcoholic and a partier and not do anything with your life, or you can say, no, I want something better. And that's what I did. That's why pursuing music meant so much to me. It meant more to me than anything. I wanted to prove to my friends and family and my mother that I was going to be somebody. That I wasn't going to let this man who treated me like shit, abused me and treated me terribly, told me I was worthless. I wasn't going to let him tear me down. I rose up And I became a successful musician. And you know what? More importantly, I became a good dad. I'm a great dad. You ask any of my kids, I always put them first. I'm sorry, guys. I put them first. The kids came first. I came second. Something that he never did for me. He was always first. His alcohol was always first. Getting that bottle, draining the bottle. The bottle sucks you dry. It sucks the life out of you. That's why I encourage my kids to stay away from it. And I got 4 great kids. I have a great wife. Nobody drinks. My son drinks a little bit now because he's 19. It's a novelty thing. But he knows, because I talk to him strongly, stay away from it. It can latch onto you like a demon and never leave you. That's why they call it the monkey on your back. You don't want that monkey on your back. And I viciously stayed away from that monkey. And I decided I'm going to be a success in life. And I have. I'm almost 60 years old. I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. I still have more great things that I'm going to do. And I want to inspire people to rise up and be a good person. Treat your friends and family and your loved ones well. Treat them well. There's so much horror and horrible things in this world. The least we can do is be good to one another. I hope that by telling my story, I can help people out there. Sorry about the tears. It's emotional for me to talk about this. Like I said, if I was telling you this story 10 years ago, there would be no emotion. Probably I could just get right through it and I would be cold. But because of thinking about it and analyzing it, since my son started asking me questions and telling him the story and telling my wife the stories, I never talked about this years ago. Never. I don't think I ever told my first wife anything about my relationship with my father. Maybe a couple things, but no big deal. It wasn't until the last 5 years, and specifically the last 2 years, that I've really, really talked a lot about him. And I've often thought, I need to get this off my back. I need to get this out. I haven't talked to a psychiatrist or anyone professional, but I'm thinking about maybe doing that, because even though I have not turned to alcohol and drugs to try and deal with my anxiety and whatnot and how I feel about my growing up with this terrible parent in my life, I haven't sought any professional help at all, but I would. It would be nice to talk to somebody, but then, I do talk to, like I said, I talk to my kids and my wife and stuff, but I thought today's the day. I'm going to actually put this out to the world. That's my story, guys. I don't care about likes and subscribes at this point, I don't even care about if comments or whatever. I just wanted to get this out. I'm not doing that for likes, subscribes, comment. This video is just from the heart. And I just wanted to tell you about how alcohol has ruined my life. I didn't talk about my Uncle Louis, my mother's brother. He died. He was an alcoholic. He died from alcoholism. My brother is right on the verge of dying again, alcoholic. Man, drugs and alcohol, just such a bad thing. And this video that I put out earlier about Duke, it just made me think about this even more. And I finally broke and decided I'm going to do this video, tears and all. This is me and my rawest, guys, but I had to get it out. Thanks for watching.